Hey everyone, welcome back to Scary Tales, where we dig up the bones of history's most haunted mysteries, dust them off, shake them up, and see what comes out. So, today we're doing something a little bit different. Now, this is normally where you'd expect me to input a like button joke or something like that, but we don't need no stinking like button joke. No, sir, not around here. See old Poe. He's been playing hide and seek a lot lately. If you take a look around, I'm sure that you're not able to find him. That's because in today's video, he's willing to give someone $50 in the form of a gift card of their choice to whoever can spot him. And all you have to do is just put in the comment section below where you think you saw him at and the time signature. Then you can go right to the details page on our YouTube channel and email him. And he will get back to you and send you a $50 gift card to the retail location of your choice. It can be online shopping, whatever you want. And then stick around to the very end because he has another even bigger announcement towards the end. And this actually involves everyone watching the video. So if you like what you hear in today's tale, you guys already know what to do. I'm not going to harp on it. I'm not going to tell you about it. Let's get into it. In the winter of 1897, the remote town of Greenbrier, West Virginia, lay just under a blanket of snow. Now, life in Greenbrier moved pretty slowly. It was a small, quiet, and unremarkable town. But as the new year dawned, an event was about to unfold that would shatter the town's peaceful existence and leave its mark in history forever. And it will do it in the most utterly bizarre fashion. It all began with a woman named Elva Zona Heaster. And though everyone in town simply called her Zona, she was a young woman, full of life, who had recently married a man by the name of Erasmus Shue. They called him Edward. And in the months following their wedding, Zona had appeared to be settling into marriage life. So her and Edward lived on the outskirts of town. They were kind of away from all the prying eyes. And although their home was small and modest, Zona seemed happy, at least on the surface. But by the end of, I believe it was January of 1897, Zona would be found dead. And her death would unravel into a mystery so strange that it defied all logic. And what happened in that small house in Greenbrier would leave people questioning the nature of justice and the limits of belief itself. It was a cold day in late January when Edward Shue, of course Zona's husband, had ended up sending a young boy named Anderson Jones to their home. See, Edward had mentioned that Zona hadn't really been feeling well. And so he wanted the boy to go check on her, while he went about his work as a blacksmith. So Jones dutifully made his way to the Shue home, knocking on the door. And when there was no response, he cautiously opened it and stepped inside. But the sight that greeted him stopped him cold in his tracks, because there at the bottom of the stairs lay Zona, motionless on the floor. And her body was arranged strangely, with one arm kind of resting at her side and the other draped across her chest. And her legs were stretched out straight, her head was tilted at a very odd angle, and her eyes were open, just staring blankly ahead. So panicked, Jones runs back to tell Edward, and within moments, the scene was filled with the frantic cries of a grieving husband. And Edward rushed to his wife's side. He scooped her up into his arms and cradled her like a fragile doll. And everyone says, he was inconsolable, refusing to let anyone touch her. And then finally, when the town's doctor, George Knapp, arrived, Edward's behavior only grew more erratic. Dr. Knapp had known Zona, and while he was saddened by her sudden death, he quickly became uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before him. Because normally, it was custom for women to prepare a deceased woman's body for burial, but Edward was adamant that no one should touch his wife, and he meant no one. He'd already dressed her in her best Sunday gown, and it was a stiff-collared dress that covered her neck, and he'd wrapped her head in a scarf. Now, Edward's scarf was so overpowering that Dr. Knapp felt that he had no choice but to perform, only this cursory examination. She'd shown signs of illness in the weeks leading up to her death, and Knapp suspected that her death might have been due to complications from maybe even pregnancy. But there was something about it, the way her head was positioned, that troubled him. And Edward's strange insistence on keeping Zona's neck hidden behind her high-collared dress, and the scarf that he had put around her, it just made the doctor uneasy. But nonetheless, Knapp hesitated to push it any further, just kind of given Edward's overwhelming grief that he was showing. And he eventually ruled her cause of death as everlasting faint, a vague term used at the time for sudden unexplained deaths. And Zona's body was quickly buried. But for her mother, Mary Jane Heaster, the case was far from closed. See, Mary Jane had never really liked Edward Shue. From the moment Zona had introduced him as her new husband, Mary Jane just had this really bad feeling about him. She just didn't like him. He seemed too secretive. He was too controlling. And, she often worried about the way that he treated her. She'd known Zona was in love, and there was really actually little that she could do to stop the marriage. But still, after her death, her suspicions just kind of grew from there. And for weeks, Mary Jane couldn't shake that feeling that something was just terribly wrong. Horribly wrong. And Edward's behavior after Zona's death was odd, to say the least. And this is to everyone. He had insisted on dressing her body himself. And it was just unusual at the time for a man to do that. He'd also refused to let anyone near her neck. And after hearing this and after the doctor's conclusion, Mary Jane couldn't believe that Zona had died of natural causes. So she prayed for any kind of sign. She begged for some kind of revelation or some way to know the truth about what had really happened to her daughter. And then, according to Mary Jane, that sign came. About a month after Zona's burial, Mary Jane claimed to have received an extraordinary visit. And as the story goes, Zona's spirit appeared to her mother in the middle of the night, just kind of standing at the foot of her bed. And according to Mary Jane, the ghostly figure of her daughter was pale and translucent, but unmistakable. This was definitely her daughter. And at first, Zona's spirit just kind of stood there. She didn't say anything. She just watched her mother, as if waiting for something. And then, after what felt like hours, the ghost spoke. And according to Mary Jane's later testimony, Zona's spirit told her that her death had not been an accident, that she'd been murdered, strangled by none other than Edward, her own husband. He'd been in a fit of rage, angry over a petty argument, and in his fury, he had grabbed her by the throat and squeezed until she was no longer breathing. And as if to prove her point, the ghost of Zona reportedly turned her head completely around, showing her mother the injury that had led to her death. Now, the apparition reportedly visited Mary Jane on 4 consecutive nights, each time repeating the same message. Zona had been murdered, and her husband was the one responsible. So no, Mary Jane, she's now convinced, kind of beyond doubt, that her daughter had been murdered. So she goes down to the local prosecutor, John Preston, and she tells him her story. Now, of course, Preston naturally was skeptical. Ghosts don't solve murders. And it just seemed far more likely that Mary Jane was just simply grieving. She was just a mother grasping at straws. But Mary Jane was insistent. And so she just begged Preston to reopen the case and order an exhumation of Zona's body. And perhaps maybe out of curiosity, or perhaps because of Mary Jane's unyielding determination, Preston eventually agreed to have the body exhumed and examined. So in late February of the same year, the body of Elva Zona Heaster was dug up from its resting place and brought to the county courthouse for a full autopsy. Now, Dr. Knapp, along with 2 other physicians, performed a thorough examination. The first time it wasn't. This time it definitely was. And what they found was shocking. They found that Zona's neck had been broken. The ligaments in her neck were torn, and her windpipe had been crushed. And there were also clear finger marks around her throat, indicating that she had been strangled. Now, the initial examination had missed these signs because Edward, remember, had refused to allow anyone to properly examine her neck. He hid it behind that high-collared dress and this scarf. So, of course, these findings confirmed, what Mary Jane had believed all along, that her daughter had definitely, in fact, been murdered. And with this new evidence, Edward Shue was arrested, and he was charged with the murder of his wife. Now, by the time that the trial actually began in June of 1897, the town was abuzz with rumors. Word had spread about this ghostly testimony that had led to this exhumation, and, many locals were eager to see whether the court would take Mary Jane's story seriously, if it was allowed. So the trial was one of the most sensational events in Greenbrier's history. And people literally came from all around just to kind of be there and to see everything and hear the proceedings. And the prosecution had a strong case. The physical evidence of Zona's broken neck and crushed windpipe left little doubt that she'd been strangled. But it was actually Mary Jane's testimony that captivated the courtroom. On the stand, she described in vivid detail the visits from Zona's ghost. She recounted how the spirit had appeared to her night after night, revealing the truth of her death and demanding justice. And then, of course, you have the defense. They tried to discredit her. They argued that Mary Jane was an unreliable witness. They even tried to say that she might have even been driven to hallucinations by grief and loss. And they claimed that there was no actual proof of this ghostly visitation and that the prosecution's case should rest solely on physical evidence. I mean, these are the rules of the court, after all. No one had ever taken a ghost's testimony, but the jury was entranced by Mary Jane's story. So whether or not they believed in ghosts, they couldn't deny that her testimony had led to the discovery of vital evidence. And without her insistence, Zona's body would have never been exhumed. And the truth of her murder might have remained hidden forever. And after just over an hour of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Guilty. Edward Shue was convicted of the murder of his wife, Elva Zona Heister, and sentenced to life in prison. Though he never confessed to the crime, the evidence was overwhelming. Edward's defense team, who tried to dismiss the idea that a ghost could even have played a role in solving a murder, but the fact remained that without Mary Jane's story of the ghostly visitation, there wouldn't have been a trial, no autopsy, and definitely no conviction. Edward would have still been free. Edward died in prison a few years later, and the case of the Greenbrier ghost became a local legend. The people of Greenbrier never forgot the strange events that had led to his conviction, and, to this day, many still believe that Zona's spirit had truly returned to seek justice for her untimely death. The story of the Greenbrier ghost is unique in American legal history. It's the only known case where a ghost's quote-unquote testimony led to a murder conviction. Whether or not you believe in ghosts, the facts of the case are undeniable. And Elva Zona Heister's death was ruled a murder, and her husband was convicted, based in part at least, on the testimony of her mother, who claimed to have received these messages and these visitations from her daughter's spirit. So in the end, the case leaves us with just one lingering question. Can the dead speak? And if they can, are we prepared to listen? So guys, what'd you think of today's story? Do you believe in it? Also, were you able to find Poe? And if so, don't forget to be the first person to put it in the comments section below with the timestamp on it for that $50 gift card. Also, I did promise that Poe had some more news, and it looks like what he's going to be doing is giving away clues. That's right. From now on, all of our videos are going to have Raven talk. And if you can decode the clues that Poe gives you during every episode, you can earn yourself a detective's badge. Now, the first person to answer it correctly will earn a badge with a corresponding prize. Each badge level, the prize increases. Now, if it were up to Poe, it would have been silly things like blooper reels or behind-the-scenes footage, but we want to keep it a little more incentivized. So I'll be giving away anything, from merchandise to more gift cards. And if you guys have any more ideas of things you'd like to receive for figuring these out, go ahead and put that in the comments section too. Now, in order to decode what Poe is saying, I've listed in our About section, if you go to our homepage, the way to decode Poe's speech. Now, so far, I've been the only one able to understand him, but that's because he's in my ear literally all day. But if you want to understand, and if you want to decode these messages to earn yourself some prizes and a badge, they go up to 10 levels, starting at Gumshoe, ending at Master Detective. Then all you have to do is go in, get the key, and throughout the videos, Poe's going to leave you clues. If you guys like today's tale, be sure to do what you guys do. Subscribe, like, comment, share. We love having you. We love telling these stories. So as always, stay curious, stay brave, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are all too real.